don't know about you guys, but 2020 did not give me much in the way of good new experiences. But one thing I am super excited about that 2020 gave me was a new favorite trilogy. And you may have heard me mention these books before, but that trilogy is the Southern Reach trilogy, and it has become one of my all-time favorite reads ever. And today I'm going to review it for you. This is going to be spoiler-free, although I am going to give details about the basic plot as far as the beginnings of the story goes. So if you are someone that likes to go into your books without much information, and this trilogy is one that you really should go in with as little information as possible, then just stop the video right now, just go read it. I promise you it will be worth it. But if you have been thinking about it and you're not really sure, or you're never going to read the series at all, but you're interested in a review, then that's what I'm going to give you here today. The Southern Reach trilogy by Jeff Vandermeer is a weird fiction, cosmic horror, sci-fi thriller all wrapped into one. It is honestly the weirdest thing I've ever read, the most confusing thing I've ever read, but one of the coolest things I've ever read. Honestly, never read anything like it before, and it really struck me just how beautiful the story was and how intense the writing was, but also the exploration of kind of a devolution within humans and the way something can cause effects on different people in different ways. And we're going to get into that a little bit more here, but those are the general reasons why I love this story so much. So, quick plot summary. The Southern Reach trilogy is about an area of the US that has been taken over by some sort of non-human entity. We're not really sure what it is, but it has been studied by a government agency called the Southern Reach for over 30 years. The area itself is called Area X, and the government agency is called the Southern Reach. The story really does follow various individuals as they attempt to understand Area X, as they attempt to find a beginning for Area X, and as they become more and more affected by the area. It's described in every synopsis as a pristine wilderness hidden behind an invisible barrier. So there's some sort of border around an area of, I believe it's like North Florida. It's a coastal area, swampland, and there's an invisible border around it that once you go in, things happen, but it doesn't really look any different than it should, but it feels different. And I'm going to have a really hard time describing things in this review because part of what makes this trilogy so excellent is that somehow Jeff Vandermeer describes things that are indescribable. And that's kind of the beauty of writing to me, is that you can describe things that are indescribable, and then I can imagine those things that I would never be able to tell you what they are. Literally, this is going to be so incoherent. It's fine. Just roll with it. That's kind of the joy of this trilogy. So it's the story of the area. It's the story of the government agency exploring the area and kind of trying to control it. And it's the story of how the area got there in the first place. So book one is called Annihilation, and there has been a movie adaptation of it. And I absolutely loved the movie, even separate from the trilogy. I have a whole book versus movie review for that first book on the channel. And honestly, I loved them both so much, and I can, even though they're very different, I separate them, and the movie on its own is excellent, even though a lot was changed. But go watch that video first and then come back here. But the first book, called Annihilation, centers around a team of scientists that are sent into the area to extract data. They don't really have a serious mission. They do have a couple of like tangible objectives that they're looking for, but their main goal is just to enter the area, obtain information and data, and then return with the information. We follow our main protagonist is the biologist. At the time, she does not have a name, and she is with a couple of companions, and we really, it's fantastic, okay? We watch the devolution of this team as they go in together with their goals, and then as the area begins to affect the individual people, and then how that affects their team, and it really starts off this whole mystery of a trilogy excellently. And it's a really reflective story, so I don't recommend it for everyone. It's very cerebral. We're mostly in the head of the biologist. There's a very little dialogue, but it is a very intriguing story and very spooky and mysterious and atmospheric, and I loved it, okay? It really sets up the mystery well. We are given a lot of tail end bits and pieces of a story, but almost zero answers to a bunch of questions. Book 1 is mainly a character study on the biologist, and it's not very action-packed, but I will say it has more movement, I think, than the other 2 books do of the trilogy. It is a lot of people's favorite. I will say that it is my second favorite of the trilogy, but it's absolutely the best way to kick off the story. It's very short, pulls you in quickly, gets your brain all muddled up and confused, and then sends you back out into the world to kind of cope with reality after what you've just experienced. Book 2 actually picks up after the events of book 1, but we are no longer inside Area X. We are no longer following the same characters. We are now following the director of the Southern Reach, the government agency, exploring and studying Area X. And this director is actually new to the team. He comes on site as a newbie, a new kid in school, and we get to watch him learn about Area X, learn about the effects of Area X, learn about the people that have been in this building for 30 years, studying something that is unknowable. It is undescribable, indefinable. There are zero answers to any of the questions, and it was fascinating. I loved book 2, called Authority. It was my favorite of the trilogy because it was such a great question of what happens to the people as they're just sitting here day after day, looking at microscopes, looking at plants, looking at film footage, just trying to discover something undiscoverable, something completely outside of our sphere of understanding as humans and completely outside of our control, which is ironic because the character we follow in book 2 is named Control. And I loved it. It has the same spooky atmosphere as the first book, although instead of being in the swamp, you're now in a dilapidated government building. And as a partial government employee who has been in dilapidated government buildings, I thought the environment and just the feel, the tone of the book was spot on for a real life situation where you've got these employees that are just there and they have no real purpose and they have no real understanding of why they're there. They just know that they come and they work and then they go home and they try not to think about work while they're at home. Book 2 is actually a lot of people's least favorites in the trilogy. A lot of people actually drop off at the beginning of book 2 because it gets kind of boring or corporate in their words, but I honestly think it did the most to freak me out because you're not in Area X. You're in the real world. But Area X is still affecting you because you're still exploring it and you're still trying to study it. And it was fascinating. There is also a lot of hypnotism in this book, in the trilogy, really. It's kind of a tool that the author uses to put unreliability into our narrators, but also it's a tool that is used by the government agency to help people try to cope with the effects of Area X. And so it brings all sorts of things into question about what is reality, and it was put to excellent use in this novel. Book 2 is also a character study of our director named Control. We get a lot of his backstory. We get to meet his parents, and at least in his mind, kind of in his flashbacks, we get to understand what makes him tick. And so then when we get to see Area X affecting him, we know him and we see how he changes. And it was the same with the biologist. We got a lot of flashbacks from her perspective. Not necessarily flashbacks, but just reflections from her perspective. And it's brilliantly done. The character work in these books is brilliantly done. I don't know if they're necessarily characters that you root for or that you understand or relate to. I don't think they're meant to be. I think they're meant to be unrelatable characters, but I think they're meant to be fascinating. And that's what they were for me. I just could not stop reading. I read each of these 3 books in 1 to 2 sittings. They're very short, very quick, and just they just suck you in, okay? They suck you in. Again, I don't know if this review is coherent because this story is just so intense. Now, at the end of book 2, there is a great event, and I can't give you any information because it will be complete and utter spoilers, but there's a big event that happens, and then some falling action, and book 3 picks up right during that falling action. Now, book 3 is the most unique of the trilogy because we are no longer in one person's perspective. We are now in multiple people's perspectives, I believe 4, and we are having flashbacks. There is second person narrative style. There is flashbacks from before Area X came, so 30 years in the past. There's flashbacks from a couple of months ago, from before the first expedition of Annihilation entered the area. And then there is present day timeline, what's going on after the aftermath of this great event. I honestly think book 3 was my least favorite, but I think that had less to do with the actual story and more to do with these different narrative styles. I had expectations of what I thought I was going to get out of book 3 because I took some time in between the reads, not intentionally. I wasn't able to get to book 3 as quickly as I would have wanted. And so I had built up in my mind what I thought book 3 was going to be about, and I was so excited for it. And then it was just different. It was not bad by any means. It was just different from what I was expecting. I really think that the flashbacks, while they were vital to the story and vital to giving us the answers we were so longing for, I really think it detracted from the story progressing. So we're no longer moving forward in plot. We're now looking back, and so we're not moving forward, but we are getting the answers. And so that's kind of the benefit of book 3, is this whole trilogy, you're just given more and more questions and you get 0 answers. But then in book 3, you get a lot of answers. I had some issues with the ending. As spoiler free as possible, this may be a spoiler. If you don't want to know anything about the ending, just skip forward a couple of seconds. But book 3 really sets it up to tell you the answer to the question. What is Area X? Where does it come from? How can we defeat it? How can we, make friends with it? How can we control it? And he builds it up in book 3 like we're going to get the answer. And he's just like, we're going to get it. And then we don't get the answer. We get some answers. To 90% of our questions, we get answers. But the other 10%, kind of the big 10%, we don't get answers. And I know that was the point. This is not a trilogy for answers. This is a trilogy for thinking and reflecting on how things affect us and our desire for control and the way our environment affects who we are as people and as a group or as a agency. But I wanted those answers. And he made me think I was going to get him, and then he didn't give me the answers. I enjoyed every character that we followed in book 3. There wasn't a character that I didn't want to be in their head for. There were some characters that I didn't really care about their story that they were telling, but I see the importance of it, and I think on a reread, I won't have any of these issues. This is a trilogy that I cannot wait to reread. I cannot wait. As soon as I was done with book 1, I was like, man, I can't wait to reread that book. I'm gonna move away from individual plot summaries for the books now and just talk about how this trilogy made me feel. I feel like that's a very important thing to kind of share in a review, as it gives you more of a personal insight into what I like when I read and whether or not you will like the same things. But I am someone that loves to think when I read. I love to shut my brain off and just be entertained, but I also love to think and love to put my brain to work and love to take what writing can do that no other art medium can and explore those things. And that is the number one thing that I loved about this trilogy, these books. I felt challenged. I felt creeped out. I felt invested. I felt confused. I felt horrified. I felt encouraged and even sometimes a little bit hopeful for the state of humanity and our future. I felt enlightened almost in this discussion of what is important and what do we value and what should we as a people value. This is sometimes called ecofiction because there is a lot of talk about the environment and about the importance of protecting our planet. Most of the setting is an outdoor setting in nature in the wilderness, and I felt encouraged and kind of challenged in how I treat the nature and the wilderness around me. Most of all, I really do think I felt entertained. Even though this was a very intellectual read, I felt entertained. This story was something that I was highly interested in. The characters were characters that I was entertained by their lives. I didn't relate to them, but I was just fascinated watching them grow and change and just become different people. I love these books so much that now I want to read everything Jeff Vandermeer has ever written before. And I have all of his books on my wish list and my TBR. And hopefully one of these days I'll get to read something else by him because I loved his writing style and I loved his ability to tell a story and I loved his ability to just write like an artist. And I feel like I just have to say that before we move on. But even though I felt all of these wonderful things that I love to feel while reading, I don't necessarily think these are the books for everyone. I think grand total rating, if I'm going to put a star rating on the entire trilogy, it would be 4 stars. Book 2, I gave 5 stars. after reading it, I really felt like it was something that everyone should at least give a shot, and it made me bump book 1 up to a 5-star as well. After reading book 3 though, and just my kind of negative experience, it wasn't negative. I guess it was just slightly disappointing. It was a bit of a letdown, but not really. You know what I'm talking about. I feel like I'd give the whole trilogy 4 stars. I don't think it's something that everyone should give a shot. Just because I don't necessarily think that it's going to give everyone the kind of literary food that they need. I do think it's something that every reader should try. If you like books, if you like reading, why would you not pick up something outside of your comfort zone and see if it's something that you enjoy? See if it's something that, like I did, found a new favorite subgenre. Like, after reading this trilogy and watching the movie, I've started exploring other forms of cosmic horror. My husband and I watched the remake of The Thing a couple of days ago, and I'm not a horror person, but I loved that movie for the same reasons that I loved this trilogy. Cosmic horror is apparently my thing, and I would have never known that unless I gave this series a shot. It is excellently written, beautifully artistic, just the most confusing thing I've ever read, but also the most entertaining. And I need to stop rambling because I'm just going to keep saying the same things over and over again. I think you should give this series a shot. If you're a reader, give this series a shot. If you're not a reader, still go for it. Just know you may have some trouble. I think I need to cut myself off here. I'm starting to repeat myself. I'm starting to get a bit rambly. I do have some spoilery things that I just want to gush about because I loved the series so much. So if you have read these books and you want to stick around to the end of the video to just hear my gushy thoughts, please do. Otherwise, if you have not read this trilogy and you just stopped by to see what these books are about, I hope you give them a shot. And if you have given them a shot in the past but felt they weren't for you, please comment down below or message me on Twitter or Instagram or something. I would love to talk to you about what you didn't like and see if I could encourage you to look past those for something else that you might glean out of these books. Either way, if you've read it, if you haven't read it, please talk to me down below. I loved this series with everything in me, and I want to hear other people's thoughts, and I want to have a conversation with you about what you thought and what you think and the answers that we didn't get. What do you think the answers are? There's just so much room for conversation with this trilogy, and I would love to hear your thoughts. I hope this review was more coherent than I feel like it was. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Okay, spoilery thoughts for people that have read the book. Whitby, as a character, as a monster, as a creature of the dark and the gloom, oh my gosh, I loved him. He creeped me out so hard before I even understood what was going on. And then in book 3, getting kind of to see what happened to him and how he was before and how he was after his experience, I loved him. And I want a whole book on Whitby. Like, Jeff Vandermeer, can we get a book from Whitby's perspective? I know this series is 6 years old, but I would love that. I liked The Biologist. I loved Ghostbird. Ghostbird spoke to me. I don't know how to say that in any other less whatever way, but she spoke to me and I loved her character. Just the way she was a brand new thing, and she didn't know what her purpose was, what her place in the world was, but I loved it. Control to me was almost like a little baby brother kind of puppy deal. I wanted to help him and I wanted to rescue him and I wanted him to get with the girl he was interested in, but at the same time I'm like, oh honey, that's just not for you at all. The ending of the story. Okay, let's talk the ending because I'm not really sure what's going on here. So they kind of say that they're on a different planet at one point, but I disagree. I think we have some kind of alternate dimension overlap happening here. I don't think there's any sort of wormhole transportation across space. I think there was interdimensional weaving going on. If you have evidence to the contrary, let me know, but that's kind of where my brain went. I do think that could be influenced by pop culture is getting more into the multiverse and dimensional universes colliding and stuff, but that's kind of where my head went. I really wanted more of an answer of did the border come down? Did they defeat Area X? What changed? Because Ghostbird said things have changed, but what was it that changed? And how are we ever gonna know? And there's just so much that I want to know moving forward. I just love this trilogy so much, and I just want to talk to people. So if you have thoughts, please, I'm begging you, please share your thoughts with me.